I just kind of assumed you knew if you were a distracted mom. But somebody asked me, how would I know if I'm a distracted mom? And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I can break this down a little bit.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast. Thank you for being with me today, this week. Whatever it is that you're doing, I am always so honored to know that you are on the other side of this camera, on the other side of this microphone, and taking the time to listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast. Before I ever push the record button with any guest, we always pray. And it was no different with my guest this week. Her name is Katie Waalkes, and we were just talking about, the podcast and what we were going to discuss and just talking about life and stuff. And then I asked her, I said, do you have any questions? And she said, can we pray? And I said, absolutely. We always do that. And our prayer always is that you, our audience, would be encouraged by what we discuss and that the Lord would speak through us and that he would be honored in our conversation. And, that everything we do would point you and point your kids to Jesus. And so we really do pray that that is how you view this podcast and what you get out of it, that you walk away encouraged and equipped to be able to do this parenting thing, this homeschooling thing, this life thing, and that you would be able to do it the best that you can according to God's word and according to biblical truth. So thank you again for being with us. I am excited about my guest this week. Like I said, her name is Katie Waalkes. I totally botched her name when I asked her, because if you look at it, the way it's spelled, you might try to figure out how to say it too. And so I'm glad that I asked before I completely butchered it on the podcast. But we are going to talk this week about the highly distracted homeschool mom. And I am so excited about this topic because this is me. I am a totally distracted homeschool mom. That might be surprising to some of you. And those of you who know me, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's you, Yvette. But before we get into our conversation, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, CTC Math. If you guys are looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. Try them out for free, ctcmath.com. You have nothing to lose. If what you're doing is working well for your kids, then stick with that. But for those of you who maybe don't like to teach math, or you're just looking for something different, maybe what you're doing works for one of your kids, but not for the other, try CTC Math. It is a fantastic program, ctcmath.com. Well, Katie, welcome to the podcast. Like I said, we're talking about the highly distracted homeschool mom, and it's so funny. As soon as I saw that you talked on this topic, I was like, oh, you got to come on the podcast because I need your help. And I know so many others need help in this area as well. It is I think one of those things that as homeschool moms, those of us who are easily distracted, those type Bs like myself, it's hard for us sometimes to think that we're doing okay as homeschool moms. We feel like we're just screwing this all up because I can't even stay focused on a single thing, much less trying to teach all of my kids and keep everything rolling smoothly throughout the day. And so I think it can cause us to become very insecure about our ability to teach. And so I would love for you to first introduce your family. And then I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't assume this, that you maybe yourself are a highly distracted homeschool mom as well. And so let's just talk about this week. But first, tell us who you are.
Yeah. So my name's Katie, and I am a second generation homeschooler, married to another second generation homeschooler. We've been married almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years in August. And I have kids ranging from, well, they're getting ready to have birthdays. They're going to be 14, 13, 12, 11, 6, and 5. I have to get a running start. If you ask me in the middle, I can't tell you how old the middle child is without going up or down. But our family is very unique. We have a lot of kiddos with different special needs. And it was funny. It was actually through one of my kids going to therapy, to a counseling therapy session, that I actually discovered that I myself have ADHD. And it was so funny because the therapist just very lovingly, with no malicious intent whatsoever, was telling my daughter who has ADHD, she's like, it's okay. She's like, I have it too. And I'm pretty sure your mom does as well. And I was like, no, I don't have ADHD. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And as we started talking, I was like, so what? Why did you say that? I'm curious, what made you think that? And so she started asking me, and I ended up getting screened for it. And I am 1000%
Wow.
ADHD. Actually more so than my husband. I knew that he had it, but I'm way more. So that was a really fun thing to find out as an adult and as a mom. So I am definitely the highly distracted homeschool mom. I have found that most moms feel like they actually fit in this category, either because of natural tendencies or because of external circumstances, because we live in that world that's constantly like yanking us in every direction. And our kids are in all the sports and there's social media and we're balancing so many things at one time that I find that so many moms find themselves there. But there's definitely ones who are more naturally that way and more that are like just end up in circumstances where they feel like that. So the things that we're going to talk about today will help and apply to all of that, hopefully.
Yeah. That's a great story. And I may fall into that category and I just have never had myself tested, but I could easily see that probably, I mean, since I was a kid, I can look back and I can see even through my academic years in school. I went to a private school my whole life and I was always just, I could not focus on anything, which is why it was hard for me to learn. And I still do that. Even when I read my Bible in the morning, I literally have to listen to it and read it with my eyes at the same time, because otherwise, and even then, I sometimes have to read the same thing over and over again because my mind just is everywhere. It's all over the place. And are you a visual learner? I'm curious to know.
Yes.
So not only are you distracted, but you see everything as you're distracted with it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a double curse.
It is. It is.
And a blessing, I think, at the same time.
Yes.
But so let's talk kind of through this. And as you've met homeschool moms and you yourself, what are some of the distractions that you think most homeschool moms face?
Yeah. So like I said, there's sort of the external distractions and the internal distractions.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually kind of asked several people on I have a YouTube channel and asked them, what are the things that you guys feel like are the most distracting to you? And some of the answers I got were, of course, the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the needs they have, the laundry or chores, the things they're trying to keep up with in their home, the calendar, like just managing everybody's schedules, especially if you have any kids that do have therapies or play dates or sports or whatnot. Sickness can even be an external distraction. Like we've all run into that, where you just have seasons where you just feel like you can't get to your schoolwork because you're constantly dealing with sickness. Of course, our phones, I think that's probably a really, really common one. And just having to-do lists, like feeling like we're constantly needing to do the next thing is always a distraction. But as I was thinking about it more, I was like, there's also internal distractions, at least for people like us, right? Because my mind in and of itself is a huge distraction.
Oh, yeah.
It's constantly going, it's constantly thinking. And I think most moms do. We're like, okay, what are we going to have for breakfast the next morning? What are we going to have for dinner? Who do I need to get where? And it can be very overwhelming, and we can be present and not actually be present at all, because our minds are everywhere else but there. And there's the sin aspect of distractions, of feeling like, we just selfishly, we don't want to do what we're supposed to do. So we allow ourselves to get distracted and sucked into things that are more interesting to us or that we want to hyperfixate on.
Yeah. You say being present and not present.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the wonderful ability that I have to read a book and have no idea what you're reading because you're thinking of something else?
Yes.
I don't think everyone can do that. I don't know if I call that a gift or a curse again, but I can read a book to my kids literally perfectly every single word and have no idea what I'm reading to them because I'm thinking of something completely different than what I'm reading.
Yes.
And so hopefully they don't ask me questions about those books. I mean, I can read a book and focus on the book, and mostly I do. But sometimes if I really have something heavy on my mind, my brain will just go off into la la land and thinking about all the things and then imagining all the things because I see everything in picture. I have like this constant movie going on in my head all the time, which I always thought that everyone did.
Yes.
I always just assumed that everybody saw everything. And then I learned years ago that that's not the case. And I was like, what do you mean you don't see everything? You don't have a constant movie going on in your head all the time. And
Yes.
yeah, it can be a tough thing, but it can be kind of fun sometimes. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. We want to thank all of our sponsors for making this show possible: BJU Press Homeschool, CTC Math, Apologia, and IEW. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Visit the show notes for links to these great companies and thank them for supporting the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. The distractions can be overwhelming in every way.
Yes. And a lot of times, like when you find yourself distracted, like somebody asked me when I started to talk on this topic, and it kind of threw me off guard because I just kind of assumed you knew if you were a distracted mom. But somebody asked me, how would I know if I'm a distracted mom? And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I can break this down a little bit. If you feel like you're constantly wasting time, if you feel like you really, you're just, you can't get to that. If you feel like a lot of the work you're doing is not at its best, and you kind of feel like you're a little bit of everything to everybody and not really able to accomplish anything or to do anything well, if you're feeling mentally exhausted and fatigued constantly, and I know as moms, there's an aspect of that.
Sure.
But I think that sometimes we blow past that really easily and we just assume that, well, moms are tired, so this is okay, and I just need to push through it. And there are physical tiredness that we feel, but when there's this mental overload, there are things we can do to kind of shift that and to take off some of that extra mental weight. And I think that's something that we oftentimes just don't think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about that. And just give some practical advice on what can we do? How do we navigate through this? But let's talk first about the problem as a homeschool mom, because we're talking to homeschool moms.
Yes.
So specifically, and I feel like, I mean, you've talked about some of it, but like we could just go on forever about why this is a problem. But I want to bring hope to the situation, because I think so oftentimes moms don't homeschool, or they want to give up on homeschooling because they think they think that the teacher in the classroom has it all together, and that she is going to be able to teach their kids in a more focused way than the mom can. And so I feel this too sometimes. I never have the urge to put my kids in a classroom, but oftentimes I'm like, man, I'm such a mess. And it's hard for me to sometimes teach my kids to be focused, because we do get things done. I don't want to sound like, we just, lollygag around the house all day, every day. I mean, that wouldn't, that wouldn't work for anybody. But, monkey see, monkey do. I mean, my girls very much take after me in this aspect. And so I know it drives my husband crazy. I don't do it on purpose. It's just how my personality is. And he loves me through it. But let's talk about the problem of this for homeschool moms, and then let's try to give some practical ways to overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big problems with it is that we can, for me, one of the ways this kind of showed up as a problem in my homeschool is I was a habitual curriculum hopper for the beginning of my homeschool years, whether it was mid-year or whether it was at the end of the year, but constantly changing up different curriculums, because I was like, ooh, something new and shiny, and FOMO, it's a real thing. And, all the different things. And I was constantly switching things up. And so there were some gaps and inconsistencies there that fell into that for my kids, that I know that they suffered because of that. It was also hard for them because of my distractedness, I would oftentimes have different expectations for the day. And so if I was feeling unmotivated, then I would be like, everything can slide. Either we're not going to do homeschool or we're going to do it, but the standards are not going to be as high. And then the next day I would be very motivated, and I would expect my kids to match my motivation, which is really not fair to them whatsoever, because they had no idea. And my kids learned really fast the system to things. They learned that if mom was tired and overwhelmed, they could get away with not doing school or not doing as much. And if mom was like really motivated, they were probably going to have to do like 2 or 3 days worth of school in one day, because then I'd be feeling this panic of being behind. But there is 1000% hope in this, because God completely shifted things in my life. And some of these strategies that we're going to share are ways that this happened, but there's also part of it that was a heart change. And like, I want to encourage, like, that is the most practical thing you can do about this, is to recognize the problem and like take it to the Lord, because if he's called you to this, like, he's going to equip you for it. And we can so often be like, well, this is just the way I am. Like, I'm kind of doomed to this. And that's not at all the case. Yes, God has made you uniquely how you are, and there's strengths to being a highly distracted homeschool mom, and we can talk about that. But there is also sin that's interwoven into these things, and asking God to really confront that in your heart and to change those things. He will be faithful to do it, you know? And so I think that's the biggest hope that I can give, is that you can do the strategies, but until you have the heart change, you're not going to see that impact.
Talk about that transition for you then, of going from realizing, and did you realize it before your daughter's therapist, revealed to you?
Yes.
Did you realize like, oh man, I'm just distracted and, kind of scattered all over the place, but you didn't really know why?
Yeah, I did not know why. I did discover that beforehand. I started to see, as my kids got older, the consequences of my choices on them. And I started to notice that they would get really frazzled, or that they were feeling like they didn't know what the expectations were going to be for the day. And at first I would get frustrated. And then, thankfully God gave me that insight to be able to see, maybe this is a me problem, not a them problem. Yeah. And so thankfully I started working on that several years before. Like, I actually only found out I had ADHD, I think it was back in 2020. So it's only been in the last 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's been a much more recent thing. And since then I'm like, okay, I can learn to find the strengths and the weaknesses and what I need to work on. But yeah, for many years, I had no idea why. I just was like, something's a little off here. And I'm just constantly going all the different directions. But there are many benefits to it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about those. We're out of time, but we're going to come back on Wednesday. We're going to talk about the benefits. I do want to talk about, some of the strengths that come with that, and then give some really practical advice on how we highly distracted moms can bring the focus in and be able to homeschool our kids with excellence. Katie, where can people find out more about you and your ministry? Talk really quickly about your YouTube channel, your podcast. What do you have going on?
Yeah, so I have several things going on. I have, my primary thing is a YouTube channel where I help homeschooling moms, and it's called Life in the Mundane. You can also find me, we have a podcast my husband and I do together on biblical marriage and parenting. So YouTube's more homeschooling, and podcast is marriage and parenting, all from a biblical perspective. And I would love for you guys to check those out.
Awesome. We will put those links in the show notes. And if you guys have not yet watched the movie, speaking of watching YouTube and watching things, watch the movie Schoolhouse Rocked, The Homeschool Revolution. You can stream it for free. Go to schoolhouserockedmovie.com. Share it with your friends. We have gotten such a great response ever since we put it out for free. It became free for streaming in March, and we've had a lot of people. I don't even know the number of people who have watched it because of that. And it is bringing great encouragement to families. And so during the summertime, when parents are thinking through what they're going to do for next year, it's not too late for them to homeschool their kids for the next school year. It's never too late. I mean, it could be, December, and they could decide to pull their kids from school. So it's never too late. But during the summertime, this is a great time to invite some of your neighbors over, invite your friends over, and watch the movie with them. schoolhouserockedmovie.com. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.
Education is discipleship, and this is something I didn't understand until I was probably 3 years into homeschooling. The Bible teaches us in Luke 6:40 that when a student is fully trained, he will be like his teacher. And as we look around the culture right now, I think it begs the question, who is teaching our children? Who is teaching our children, and what are they teaching our children? And to me, the primary benefit of having my children home with me is I am able to impart my worldview to my children.
As homeschool moms, we want our kids to have a love of learning. And some of the best ways to do that, in my experience, is to follow those rabbit trails and to be willing to take a second and take a break from the curriculum and just follow that thing that's really interesting to them. And as highly distracted homeschool moms, oftentimes we are more willing to do that and to kind of go off the beaten path. And I really do think that's a strength. I have friends who are very type A and who very much wish they could. They're like, but to us, that to-do list is such the driving force that we have trouble taking the opportunity to dig into something. And so I found that to be a huge strength across the board.